Chapter 1 pretty much talks about critical thinking skills and how they are used in a legal setting. Critical thinking is pretty much just understanding arguments, assessing and evaluating them, and then it pretty much helps with reasoning and forming judgments in a judicial setting. Chapter 1 goes on to talk about the 8 steps in critical thinking, which are what are the facts, what is the issue, what are reasons, or what are the reasons and conclusions, what are the relevant rules of law, does the legal argument contain significant ambiguity, and we'll talk about that. It talks about that a little bit. What ethical norms are fundamental to the court's reasoning, how appropriate are the legal analogies, and if there's any relevant missing info. And that's just kind of how critical thinking is applied in the courts. Goes on to talk about the facts and issues. Fact is pretty much used to help gather evidence on actions taken and the issues that occurred. And then issues are, it just forms a reaction. It's basically what they are in the courts, why they're there. That then talks about reason and conclusion, and that reason is just an explanation in support of the conclusion. And then it goes on to talk about the relevant rules of law, which are basically a record of judicial decisions that are based on conclusions on a case. Chapter goes on to talk about ambiguity, which is pretty much just 2 or more interpretations of a case or of an issue or of something. Talks about ethical norms next, which is freedom, which is act without restriction by rules, pretty much, and security, safe from people interfering with your property rights and all that. Justice, receiving product for your labor, and efficiency, which is getting the most out of something and through minimizing costs. It talks about analogies, basically that it's dependent on legal decision making, and if there's any missing information, and that it basically talks about asking questions that help with understanding someone's reasoning. And then conclusions should be based on reasoning, is what it talks about at the end. And then the last little bit of the chapter talks about just everything that we went through throughout the chapter.